I'm Nathan Ponchard, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the eagerly awaited 2022 Toyota Land Cruiser 300 Series. It's the first new Land Cruiser in 14 years. This car is completely new. Hooting along on this dirt road here, and this thing is just taking it in its stride. It feels really good. It's like Bigfoot walking over turf. If you want one, put your name down now and prepare to be patient. I can tell you, in all honesty, it was absolutely worth the wait. Now, there are 6 models in the new 300 series lineup, but I chose to do the video with the GR Sport because it's the hero car. It's the one everyone likes, it's the coolest looking, and it is arguably the newest because they've never really done anything like this before. Now, speaking of new, there is so much that's new about this car, which means I have a lot to talk about. So if you want to skip through sections, just go to the bottom of the video and skip to another section if you want to go there, because there's a lot to cover. It's a completely new four-wheel drive. It's the first new Land Cruiser in 14 years. People have said online that they think that the 300 series should be called the 280 series because it's not new enough, but the chief engineer told us that this car started from zero. That was his exact quote. This car is completely new. Even the chassis, everything underneath it. It is called the GAF platform, which is part of Toyota's new global architecture, but again, like before, it's a separate chassis with a double wishbone front and a live axle rear and all that stuff that makes Land Cruiser great, but it has a lot of steps ahead in terms of making it more modern. Now, part of what makes this Land Cruiser so modern is that it has a whole bunch of aluminium parts. The bonnet, roof, doors and tailgate are all made of aluminium, which helps the car lose, or four-wheel drive, lose between 135 and 180 kilos compared to the old 200 series. Yet, the GR Sport here still weighs 2,630 kilos, so anything's a step in the right direction, right? Also new among the car is that the engine, which we will talk about when we're driving it, but is completely new, 3.3 litre twin turbo diesel V6, mated to a 10-speed automatic, so completely new driveline as well. The engine's been moved back 70 millimeters and been moved down 28 millimeters to make it have a lower center of gravity. Even the weight distribution of the 300 series has changed. It only has 53.5% over its front axle and 46.5% at the back, which is actually better than most front engine rear wheel drive sedans. So surprise there. So let's start walking around the GR and point out what makes this model in particular really cool. Now, all of the Land Cruiser 300s look identifiably new, but some of them look better than others. The top spec sort of on-road model called the Sahara ZX actually looks better in the flesh than it does in photos, especially when it's not silver, but the GR Sport looks good in everything. Photos, front, back, sides, you name it. Now, what makes it look good is all that sort of blackout stuff that you kind of either love or hate, but it works really well on this four-wheel drive. The grille here at the front has this white Toyota lettering that completely harks back to sort of the 70s look of other vintage Toyotas, but also makes it look kind of retro mod as well, which I really like. Love these huge big LED lights that run over the side here with little Land Cruiser written in the headlight there. This is the off-road model. GR Sport isn't GR, which is the full performance version. The GR Sport is kind of like more of a niche model like in other Toyota vehicles, and in this case it's all about off-roading. So that means it gets its own tyres. These are all-terrain tyres rather than the other Bridgestones that are on other models. We also have black mirrors here, and we have black door handles, black side steps, black wheels, black roof rails. You name it, it's all about blacking it out. But now that I'm standing here, I probably should point out though that this is on exactly the same wheelbase as the 200 series, which is why people have kind of thought that it might be a re-engineered old car, and it's not. It's about right sizing it. Like, Australians love the Toyota Land Cruiser, so they asked a lot of customers what they wanted in their new cruiser, and they said, we want all of these things, which is like refinement, better switchgear, more power, more economy, you know, like what everyone wants really, but they didn't want a bigger four-wheel drive. And so you have kind of the same size, but in a cooler shape. So we've still got a 2850 millimeter wheelbase, and we've got a car that roughly takes up about the same amount of room on the road, which I think is intelligent engineering in 2021. Bigger is not always better. Now, speaking of big, we're going to the boot here because it's huge. I should point out that this GR Sport only comes in a 5-seat, as does the Sahara ZX and as does the base GX. So if you want 7 seats, you want the GXL, the VX or the Sahara. But there's 6 models, so there's heaps. Now here is cavernous, 1131 litres of boot space, although Toyota does only claim it to the ceiling, but you can tell, look at it, it's massive. It actually has a little bit more than the 7-seat. It's 1004 litres because it has 2 rear seats that slide into the ground here, whereas this is completely open and unspoiled. Under the floor here we have a little tray, and under the back here we have a full-size spare. So it's all about making it as practical as possible. You might not even need to have one of the roof racks that have been designed among a whole bunch of other accessories for the Land Cruiser in Australia. I think they can hold 90 kilos, but there's so much room in here you might not actually need it. Here we've got a little 100-watt 220-volt outlet where you can plug in a laptop or a hairdryer if you have to, or something else like that, which makes it kind of practical. There's a couple of cup holders in the back here that you could also use for a barbecue. Now we have an electric tailgate here, so I can't really tell how light it is, even though it's made out of aluminium. While I'm standing here, I should point out that the Land Cruiser retains its 3,500 kilo towing capacity because customers, again, thought that that was the right thing. They thought it worked well for the car, and it also meets a sweet spot between how stiff the rear suspension needs to be able to carry all this extra weight and how supple it needs to be so good off-road. Now, if you think the outside looks kind of transformed, wait till you get inside. Toyota has been doing some pretty good interiors of late, and the Land Cruiser 300 series is among their better ones. Now, we're in the GR Sport here, so obviously we're at the top of the level of what the Land Cruiser offers. There is a fair bit of differentiation between them, seeing the base GX still has vinyl floor, you know, the hose out floor as we used to call it, and cloth seats. The VX, which is a nice middle ground between them, has synthetic leather like fake leather, but it has fan cooling, so at least your bum doesn't get too sweaty. It also has this premium dash like this GR Sport here with this stitching and stuff like that. The stitching on the tops of the doors. So the top 4 grades actually all have that, as well as the polished door handles, this beautiful steering wheel with this lovely leather. It does have a real feeling of luxury, and as we'll discover when we drive it, that actually fits with the way that the Land Cruiser drives. This GR Sport here though does have proper leather. This one here is a red car on the outside and has charcoal leather here. The white car that we have here has red leather interior. So there's 2 options for you. I probably would choose this one rather than the other, but hey, whatever. The center thing in the dashboard though is this 12.3-inch screen that is in everything from the VX up, so VX, Sahara, GR Sport and Sahara ZX. Now the VX one that I drove earlier only has a 10-speaker Pioneer stereo, and that is still really, really good. But then the top levels have 12-speaker JBL stereo, which is even better. So, God, even if it didn't have that good a refinement on the freeway, you could drown it out with a stereo because the sound is excellent. Now there's also 2 different types of dashboards. The higher models with this 12.3-inch screen have a different control layout here for the switches. Now Toyota said that they were designing the switchgear based upon customer feedback and making things easy. And while that definitely works for the drivetrain stuff, which is all here grouped together with the drive mode, the multi-terrain select, all those other off-road buttons, the high and low range that we'll use when we're driving the car, diff locks, etc., right here. But the ventilation stuff is different depending on the size of the screen. This upper spec model here has this whole new row of nicely sort of polished aluminium look buttons here, and then all of the switchgear for all of the ventilation here, which includes seat heating and cooling, and in the case of this GR Sport here we have a steering wheel heater. But to get to the recirc, which you kind of think would be a pretty obvious thing in a car that does do a lot of off-roading, you actually have to go to the climate up here, and if you don't have Apple CarPlay in, then it can be nice and big like that. But if you've got Apple CarPlay plugged in, which is wired through the plug-in down here, then it'll only have a little strip at the bottom, depending on what screen you've got. It is probably more complex than it needs to be. Whereas in the lower grade cars, it just has a button in the center here, which just, to me, seems a little bit silly. But once you get used to it, because it is still slightly daunting the way it's all laid out, it is quite easy to use. In terms of the storage and what the Land Cruiser offers, we have this huge box in here that opens both ways. Driver and passenger, has a little tray in here, and it is quite deep, but it's also chilled. It's got a cool box button here so you can air condition your cans of drink and stuff. Speaking of which, you've got 2 cup holders here, but you can only fit a 600ml bottle in the door, which is a little bit small in a car this substantial. We also have wireless phone charging, which is in most models. We have 2 USB-C ports down here. Actually, we've only got 1 and a 12-volt outlet, and then a regular USB there. And there's also a CD slot here, which is probably for the navigation, but maybe it's also for a CD. If you've got one, then you could probably try it. I didn't bring one with me. Glove box here is still 2-level as well, which is nice and really beautifully made. And that's another thing about the interior in here. It is beautifully made. All the switchgear is lovely. This set of instruments in front of me here, which is still 2 nice big analog dials with a 7-inch display screen in the middle in anything that's VX or above, again with the big screen, all just works really beautifully. Now on the doors here, same again, 1 touch power windows. I think all models have auto fold mirrors, which is a good step in the right direction. We have 3 setting memory for the driver's seat here, which is also pretty good, and the driver's seat itself is really comfortable. Sitting here with this great view out in front of me, this great grab handle here, and this lovely sort of suede-like anthracite roof lighting, which is in from mid-spec VX and above, just adds a level of class, as does actually having a sunroof from VX and above. Like, you're not paying a small amount of money for this car. The base model is $89,990, and this GR Sport is nearly $140,000. So if I'm paying $114,000 for the VX I drove earlier, you'd expect it to have a sunroof. Now, as I'm about to get out, I noticed we do have adaptive cruise here, and I should point out just how many safety systems the 300 series has. Everything has active cruise with lane departure warning. Everything also has A/B with cyclist detection and nighttime pedestrian detection. They also have junction A/B with steering assist collision avoidance. They also have reversing cameras. Everything has 10 airbags. And if you go to the VX or above, you also have lane trace assist with a steering wheel vibration. That'll actually nudge you back into the lane, and that's sort of quite good for a big four-wheel drive. Now let's get in the back seat. Now, if you needed a reminder that we're in a separate chassis 4 drive, it's probably sitting in the back seat here because the floor is relatively high, which means that the seat can't really sink down deep enough to give you true under thigh support. But that said, it's not uncomfortable, certainly for the 2 people sitting in the outer 2 positions. Now, I'm sitting here slightly splay-legged, but I'm quite a bit above the front seat. I've got this lovely low window line here, like an old Range Rover or maybe another Land Cruiser, which gives you a great view. We've got a B-pillar grab handle here, another one up here, and we not only have air vents in the roof here, we also have 2-zone climate control in the back here. So both sides of the car can control their temperature, and we have seat heating and seat cooling for these outer positions with this leather perforation in this GR Sport model. Down the bottom here we have 2 USB-C ports, and we also have a 12-volt outlet. But I will point out that in the middle here we also have quite a broad transmission tunnel. It's not high, it's just broad. So when you're sitting in this seat here, which is nowhere near as comfortable as the 2 outer pair, you have to have your feet a long way around the side of it, or I suppose if you're a kid, sitting on top of it, but it isn't as comfortable as perhaps it could be. In the center here we have a fold down armrest that's reasonably in line with the one in the door. We have 2 pop-out cup holders here, but the doors, like the front, only take a 600ml water bottle. They won't take anything bigger. You could probably shove something in one of these fairly big map pockets in the front here, but it's not really, it's kind of ironic storage, it's not real storage. To move the adjustable backrest, it does have a lever down the side here, just a plastic one, so you can sort of go between, fairly close to actually quite a fair way back, but that's it. No runners, just the seat. Pretty basic, but I'll show you how the 7-seat works in another Land Cruiser in one sec. Now I'll show you how to inelegantly get into the back seat. Getting in there though is reasonably easy with this. You just grab the lever on the side, the seat double tumbles, remove the headrest for camera purposes, click it in place, hold the lever, put the backrest where it's meant to be, and you can adjust the backrest here with a little clip on the side. Now, it's actually not that uncomfortable rake-wise, but my knees are like here. I can't fit my feet underneath the seat in front of me. I do have an amazing view because my head is pretty much wedged into the ceiling. I do have also an air vent here, as does this person. We've got a USB-C port on either side, and we've got space for 2 smallish sugary drinks, which is great. I will point out too that the space in the boot behind this seat when it's erect is only 175 litres, so not a whole lot, but then when it's down, look how much you have. The official combined fuel consumption for the Land Cruiser 300 series is 8.9 litres per 100 kilometres. However, we averaged 11.1 litres per 100 kilometres today, admittedly on a fairly blustery day and driving the car the way it demands to be driven, which is with enthusiasm. The warranty for the car is 5 years or unlimited kilometres. However, Toyota will extend that to 7-year warranty for the engine and the driveline if you stick to the scheduled servicing at a Toyota dealer. The scheduled servicing is every 6 months or 10,000 kilometres and is capped for 5 years at $375 a service, which means $3,750 over 5 years. In the past 12 months, the median budget direct customer paid $1,214 to comprehensively insure a new Toyota Land Cruiser. However, everybody's situation is different and your premium will vary on things insurers take into account, like where you live, whether you garage your car and your driving history. So right now I'm in the GR Sport, which is the hero of the Land Cruiser 300 series because firstly, it looks so cool. Now I also drove a VX today, which is meant to be the volume seller in Australia. It has standard suspension for a Land Cruiser, which means fixed rate dampers, double wishbone front suspension and a 4-link live rear axle with 18-inch wheels and Bridgestone Jeweler tyres. Now the difference between the VX and the GR Sport is that the VX has fixed rate dampers, whereas the GR Sport and the Sahara ZX above it, or just above it, because they're about the same, but the Sahara ZX is much more of an on-road biased car, whereas the GR Sport is meant to be the off-roading king. The two top cars have adaptive dampers. But this GR Sport also has what Toyota calls EKDSS, which is Electronic Kinetic Dynamic Suspension System. As you can see, we're hooting along on this dirt road here and this thing is just taking it in its stride. It feels really good. Now, what that anti-roll system does is that it actually electronically disconnects the anti-roll bars off-road to increase the wheel articulation of the car. I think it's 715 millimeters, and it automatically connects it again when it's on the road, which is pretty darn clever, especially for a Land Cruiser. And that brings me to what is most noticeable about this car, and that is just how exceptionally refined it is and just how much of a step forward it is in terms of its refinement and sophistication. Now, even the normal VX just is whisper quiet on the freeway. It suffers from a little bit of crosswind intrusion, I suppose. Today was a very windy day, but it's just an effortless car. Toyota said that the engineers driving around in 2014 doing a massive drive around 5 continents found the 200 series tiring. And the one thing they didn't want the 300 series to be is that. And I think you can instantly tell that from the moment you start driving it, even in the city. Now, this GR Sport with its adaptive dampers adds an even greater level of plushness to the ride. And maybe with these Dunlop Grand Trek all-terrain tyres that it has, they might be a little bit better to ride on, I don't know, but they are definitely designed for it to be the off-road king. So you can feel a little bit of sort of graininess at tyre level in the car that isn't in the standard VX. We're currently in normal, but actually no, I was in comfort. So we're just cruising along. Normal adds a little bit extra firmness to the damping, and the two top cars with the adaptive suspension also have Sport, Sport Plus and Custom. So this is not your average old school Land Cruiser anymore. This is a completely transformed car. Fundamental to making the GR Sport and every other Land Cruiser variant just so damn good to drive is the drivetrain. Under the bonnet is no longer a 4.5 litre twin turbo V8 diesel, it is a 3.3 litre twin turbo V6 diesel. Now it has 227 kilowatts at 4,000 RPM, which is 27 more than before, and it has 700 Newton meters from 1,600 to 2,600 RPM, which is a really massive spread of torque, especially when you consider that it now has a 10-speed automatic transmission. So there is never a moment where the Land Cruiser doesn't have the torque to be able to pull a situation. It feels effortless and it's refined and it's quick too. The top speed claim for this car is 210 kilometers an hour. And if you've seen one in the flesh, you'll realize just how upright the front of this vehicle is and how pushing that amount of metal through the air at 210 is a feat in itself. So combining this tremendous turbo diesel V6 and this excellent transmission with a level of chassis poise that it never had. The Land Cruiser 200, for all of its goodness in many areas, felt ponderous when you're really trying to hustle it along. And this one, you can have fun in it. It's actually, like, I'm doing fairly brisk speed right now. The car is sitting planted in corners. It's easy to place. I'm in sport, but I was in normal before, and normal was still fine. It's just a fingertip car. You can string it through corners together, even though I know it's not a car, it's a serious four-wheel drive. And we're on the all-terrain tyres, and it still handles really well. In fact, you start to hear the tyres squeal before the Land Cruiser actually gives up any kind of handling, because it really does handle well. And like I said, the ride, like this car on adaptive suspension, is just smashing over this surface, which is something that most separate chassis four-wheel drives just are incapable of doing. So kudos to the Cruiser. And as this 10-speed transmission shifts up through the gears, it barely drops any more than 500 RPM between each shift. Apparently the shifts are twice as fast as they were in the 6-speed auto. Either way, it's in another league. And yet you can actually use 10th gear in this car. At cruise controlled sort of 118 on the freeway, it's mostly using 9th, but at 120 and above, which, let's face it, that's what Land Cruiser owners are going to do out in the country, it is in 10th at 1600 RPM, ticking along comfortably and calmly in the background, sitting directly on the beginning of that torque shelf at 700 Newton meters. About the only two things I could really pick on about the 300 series is the sort of, I suppose, overzealousness of its lane keep assist. Like, if you start to nudge a lane on the freeway, it'll actually sort of brake and kind of slew a little bit back into the lane. It is, I get that it's being safe and it's being cautious, but it is a little bit clumsy in the way it does that, and it does become annoying if you're just sort of tracing the edge of a lane, although you can just turn it off by holding the button on the steering wheel here. And the other one is adaptive cruise control, which in typical Toyota fashion, it is very sensitive to when a car is in front of you. You can reduce the distance, but in the Land Cruiser in particular, you notice that it's braking and you're like, what's going on? And then you realize there's a car or truck way in the distance, and you just have to change lanes earlier than you would. Beyond that, it is super hard to pick on this car. Even its steering, which was something that Land Cruisers have never been known to be any good at, is actually pretty good. Like in the VX, you can switch between normal and sport, and it adds a really solid level of weighting to it without being heavy. It actually makes it better to string twisty roads together, but it's still effortless in normal. And in here in the GR Sport, when we've got 5 modes, it's still pretty accurate, pretty crisp. Like I said, you can drive it on your fingertips, and yet it only has an 11.8 metre turning circle, which is again entirely doable, and 3 turns lock to lock, which shows that it actually has response built into it. It's not a wheel twirling kind of amateur hour like it used to be. It is completely on its game and helps make this car so good to drive. Okay, so now I'm off-road in the GR Sport. I've put it in low range and I've locked the center diff. Now, unlike every other Land Cruiser, which all have center diffs as standard, the GR Sport also has a front locking diff and a rear locking diff. So it has 3, which is excellent. Now, there's no dispute in the world that the normal Land Cruiser, any of the models, could absolutely smash this course, but this car is about to try and prove that it's like Bigfoot walking over turf, which so far it is. So now we're going down a pretty steep descent here, and we're using DAC crawl, which automatically brakes the car going downhill. It's just hill descent control with a different name. And we can use the mode select dial here to choose the speed of us going downhill. Now I've actually got it in the fastest speed, which is 5 to 6 kilometers an hour, but I can slow it down. There's 5 different speeds and it's all pretty effortless. There's 235 millimeters of ground clearance under this thing, which is among the better ground clearance amounts for pretty much anything that has four-wheel drive. There are a couple of really special things that, like the Ranger Raptor and stuff, that have up into the 260s, but 235 is a substantial amount. It's pretty much not that different to the old Land Cruiser because people thought that was sort of right-sized, and they're probably pretty correct about that. Actually, you don't need a bigger four-wheel drive. You don't need a longer wheelbase. This is plenty. 2850 millimeters, same as the 200 series. Now, the shape of the 300 series bonnet, it has this two high sections on the outside and this big dip in the middle, and it's actually not done for aesthetic reasons. It's done for functionality, because when you're sitting in the driver's seat and you're trying to look down and peer over the front of that sort of cliff-like nose of this car, you can actually see through the center channel there a bit better than you normally could. Now we're going to try turn assist here. We're going to have it in downhill ascent control crawl, and you hit this button here next to the diff lock button, and it starts to sort of lock the inside wheel to make the car be able to turn super tight. Like it already has a pretty tight turning circle, but this makes it that much better again for really tight off-roading situations. We also have this multi-terrain system, which is MTS here, which you hit and it'll show when you're getting close, when the sensors detect that there's something that you need to see on the cameras. It has a camera underneath the car and at the front of the car to show whatever's going on underneath the cruiser. Now we're going to try the front and rear diff locks. Now we're already in 4 low with the center diff locked. We're going to do the rear one first and then the front one second. They're both showing red next to the orange of the other one. And we're doing this quite challenging hill that I actually have done in other four-wheel drives before, but I wonder how good the GR Sport is at it. Effortless. Bit different to a Suzuki Jimny, which also got up that hill. So we've got the normal drive select, which is Eco, Comfort, Normal, Sports, Sport Plus and Custom in the GR Sport, or we can go multi-terrain select, and this is what the Australians helped develop, and we have auto, dirt, sand, mud and deep snow. All at the push of a button just here, nice and easy. We just averaged 60.3 litres per 100 kilometres for 34 minutes of driving for 3.9 kilometres. So that's what happens when you go off-road in 2,630 kilos worth of awesome four-wheel drive. So you've probably guessed by now that I really love the 300 series Land Cruiser. Finally, for me, it has so many dimensions other than just being awesome off-road and having great resale and being super reliable and tough as old nails and all those other things that apply to all of them. This car has sophistication and class. And when you get up to the upper end like this beautiful GR Sport at $139,000, you have a car that has on-road power and poise and handling fun, as well as something that rides really well, is really quiet, looks really good. You know, what's not to love? There's really only a couple of things, those few active safety, sort of overprotective aspects of the car, a couple of elements of the switchgear, and maybe the middle seat not being as good as in a normal monocoque SUV. Like, other than that, it's still fine. It's just that if you want one right now, and like honestly, who doesn't? It looks so good. You're going to have to wait for quite some time if you're living in Australia, because right-hand drive production is currently paused as of late October, which is what it is right now. It is meant to start again in November, but it hasn't as yet. So that's already been 2 months of production not happening. And this is one of only 500 cars in the country, and there's already been more than 10,000 people put their name down for one of these cars. So if you want one, put your name down now and prepare to be patient. But I can tell you, in all honesty, it was absolutely worth the wait. If you haven't subscribed, please do so below the video, hit the notification bell and leave a comment on the Land Cruiser 300 series or on Chasing Cars. Thanks for watching.